it's Steph, and today I want to chat about Chaturanga. So most of us know, if we've done yoga classes before, that Chaturanga is one of the most repetitive transitions or poses, movements that we do in a yoga class, especially a vinyasa class. And it is also one of the most advanced transitions or poses that you could do in a class. So if we're not doing it correctly or within a safe, range of movement for our body, then doing it repetitively is really only going to hurt us more than actually help us when it comes to building strength on our mat. So in my personal experience of Chaturanga, I had a shoulder injury, dislocated shoulder, because I'm hypermobile, and I was kind of nursing this injury, but I was still doing yoga. I was teaching classes, thinking that this would be the way to kind of build up my shoulder strength again and get stronger and make it better. But when I was teaching a more classical, traditional style of yoga, it was actually inflaming my shoulder more than anything, to the point where I couldn't really even do a Chaturanga because it hurt so bad. But when I came across core strength vinyasa and the whole movement of the plank wave, I started to teach that, practice it myself, and notice that my shoulder didn't hurt anymore. This is really interesting. I can't get enough of this. So if you're wondering kind of my personal story about, why I teach the way I teach, it's because I've had my own injuries. I've had my own experiences with, shoulder injuries and knee injuries and ankle injuries, and I want to be able to teach to the people that, come in with injuries and give them different options and teach in a way that is going to be good for your body and not, break it down or wear it down. So shoulders to me are huge. They are so important. They're one of the most, easily damaged or injured parts of the body, and also take a lot of time, patience, and just overall rehab to build back up through the strength. So for me, I attribute my shoulder strength, which doesn't bother me at all really anymore. And for a while there, it was difficult to even put on a shirt to bring my arm up overhead. I attribute it to the gym, lifting weights, knowing my body, knowing my limits, avoiding certain things. So avoiding a traditional Chaturanga, avoiding things that are, handstands, different things that are going to take my shoulder and force them to either go out of range of motion or that I wasn't strong enough to do, and just focus on what I could do. So that's my story behind why I'm so passionate about teaching Chaturanga in a healthier way, because I never want someone to have to go through the pain and injury that I did with my shoulder. So if you've noticed from coming to my classes, we not only do a plank wave from down dog into plank to set up our Chaturanga, but I've also kind of taken out the traditional Chaturanga and I've made it more into a push-up. Because that's what it is. Chaturanga is a tricep push-up, which is one of the most advanced variations of a push-up. And I've just taken it and made it something that is more functional. It works for all bodies. It's healthy range of motion for the shoulders, and it's going to make you stronger versus tear down and break down your shoulders. So if you've ever gone to a class and you've done so many Chaturangas that your shoulders hurt the next day, be very aware of that and know that that's not always, your muscles being sore. That's your joints and your ligaments being stressed to the point where they shouldn't be. So just being more aware of your body and tuning into what movements maybe you need to back off on. So hopefully this will give you some ideas of different variations to do for Chaturanga. So I've done videos before on the plank wave, and I'll just show it to you now that this is how I set up for a Chaturanga, but I'll also show you kind of how I make it more into a traditional push-up. So first of all, starting in down dog, creating that foundation in the hands, we soften the joints first, always softening, bending down, inhaling, we exhale, lift that tailbone, we wave it forward. This not only activates the pelvic floor and the deep core line, but it decompresses the spine. So by the time I get here, notice how much longer I am and that I have to actually swivel my feet back a little bit to get in that plank position. Now from here, I'm going to lower the knees and the tops of the feet. Why? Because my shoulders aren't warm, first of all, so I definitely don't want to be doing this from my toes if I haven't even warmed up my shoulders, but also because the more I slow it down, the harder it is. So I don't have to do every single Chaturanga on my toes. In fact, I don't do most Chaturangas on my toes because I'm working on slowing it down and building up strength. So my kind of rule of thumb is that if you can't do a push-up, a quality, regular push-up on your toes, you definitely shouldn't be doing a chaturanga on your toes. So don't feel like you can't go to your knees because that is, you know, lesser, not as advanced. It's actually very advanced if you're doing it correctly and slowing it down. So I'm starting here, I'm gonna inhale and I'm gonna exhale, lower down as slow as I can. Notice my elbows are not going to rub against my rib cage. I'm actually letting my elbows go out just a little bit like I would in a regular push-up, and I'm lowering down slow. Notice my stomach hasn't even hit the ground yet. And also notice my shoulders are staying lifted about as high as my elbows. Okay, so we don't want to just dive down into those shoulder joints. Super bad for our shoulders. So especially when we're lowering all of our body weight into them. So I always try and teach my students to keep your shoulders as high as your elbows, maybe even up a little bit higher. A good kind of rule of thumb here is you can bring blocks depending on your body type, but usually the blocks here are about as high as my shoulders should be, so I can't even go down any further. So that's kind of a good way, if you need a visual, to come down. Now from there, I have another video about pressing back up, whether it's into, you know, a plank on the knees or pointed toe plank, but this video we're talking about chaturanga. Why do we lower all the way down instead of just going halfway? So a lot of times the traditional chaturanga, we come from a plank position that we maybe stepped or jumped back into. We go down halfway, we hover, and then we go right into our up dog. But if you notice my shoulders, I dove right down into my shoulder joint, and then I put all the strain into my low back as I moved into my up dog or cobra, whatever your next transition is. So we're actually losing a ton of the strength by A, not coming all the way down to the ground. Why? Because we have to activate the back of our shoulders, our shoulder blades, and we have to use our back body to press ourselves back up. So if we're only always going down and not coming back up the way that we came down, we're actually losing half the benefit of that entire movement. So it'd be like you going in the gym, doing a push-up, coming down, but then never coming back up, which is not possible, obviously, because we have to come back up somehow. But think of that as like being your chaturanga. If you're only going down, hovering, so you're not actually even hitting the ground, and then you're going right into a back bend or whatever your transition pose is after that, you're losing the benefit of coming back up. So if you tried a few times and you've never done it before, you're gonna feel a lot of work in your back body. And the whole goal is to come back up the way you came down. So if I'm coming down here, I don't want to come back up that way. And that's what will happen a lot of times if we don't have the core strength to press back up. So when I come down, I want to use that exhale, and I want my whole body to move together, integrated as one, versus moving into a back bend or kind of dumping and straining on our low back. So chaturanga has so many kind of misconceptions about it that, you know, we have to do it from our toes and we have to keep the elbows in, which is super unnatural and actually forces you to crunch down into your shoulders if you're here versus taking your arms a little bit wider, especially for people that have wide shoulders. You definitely don't want to be here. So taking your elbows a little bit wider and getting more in a push-up position, because that's essentially what this movement is. It is a push-up. So if we're gonna do a push-up repetitively, constantly in a yoga practice as a transition, let's at least get the most bang for our buck and do it the best way that we can so that we actually do build strength, you know, in our workouts, in our everyday life, on the mat, doing, if you want to get into, you know, a handstand or an arm balance, then we have to do proper strength training to get there. And like I said, warming up the shoulders. So doing a chaturanga right off the bat is not gonna warm up our shoulders. We have to, you know, do some shoulder mobility and maybe do some little mini push-ups from the knees and just doing different things to get those shoulders warm and the back body and the chest all working so that then when we do get to those chaturangas or those push-ups, We can do them from a place of, integrity and strength in our body and being warm and kind of conscious and aware of, what we're doing and what our goal is with it. So if you have any questions about Chaturanga, I could go on about this topic for days because I'm, like I said, very passionate about keeping your body healthy, getting strong, building strong muscles to, take care of these joints, especially our shoulders. So leave a comment below or try out the kind of variation of Chaturanga and let me know what you think.